Hey, everybody, and welcome to the strategy session. I'm Rick Wilson, your host. It's 7 p.m. on the East Coast. It's the 30th day of July in the year of our Lord 2024, 98 days until Election Day. We are joined tonight, Stuart Stevens and I are joined by Santiago Mayer, who is an expert on the politics of Gen Z, which has suddenly become a super relevant point in our political calculus this year. Why? Well, when Joe Biden left the race, it turned the politics of this moment on its head. We are delighted to have Santiago with us tonight. I want to welcome you to the show, Santiago, first off, and give us your summation, your assessment of what happened Sunday, now 9 days ago or 8 days ago, whatever it is, to the politics of this country with Gen Z voters in particular.
Might have been 9 days ago, but it feels like a
Not,
lifetime.
it all
I
runs
think,
together.
well, listen, I think obviously young people saw Vice President Harris jump into the race, and even if they weren't paying attention yet, they saw the history of her candidacy. They saw her as someone who was relatable, as someone who was fun, and they were ready to go all in for her. And I think that's really what we have seen. A lot of people who were simply kind of tuned out all of a sudden cared a lot about this. I mean, I can tell you from the Voters of Tomorrow side, we have received more chapter applications in the last few days than we have in the past previous months combined. We received more in 48 hours than we had received in the previous 2 months,
Right.
right? We had our best fundraising day ever, even better than when we endorsed President Biden originally in March. And what we have seen really over the past few days on social media, on the ground, on fundraising calls, on organizing calls, on Zooms, right? Like we are on volunteering numbers. We're seeing so much energy behind Vice President Harris, and that energy is due to her actually doing what she says she does.
Right.
Every time she goes out there, she says she loves Gen Z. And what Gen Z is showing right now is that we love her right back.
So before she came in, we had the two old men problem, and I think she's been in the period she's had her kickoff. She has been showing a degree of energy and engagement and happy warrior that I think comes across as very genuine, comes across as very authentic. You know, this is who she is. She does dance. She laughs. She's got a big old laugh. All these things. Is some of this that authenticity feel that sense that you're really getting the real her? I mean, because if you were there are a lot of politicians and media folks who would say you must never express your emotions like that, Madam Vice President. You must be tightly constrained. Talk to us a little bit about her character and how that's playing in this big fight.
For sure. I think last week I described her as she's sort of like a cool aunt. And that's really sort of the vibe that she gets, right? Like she takes her job very seriously, but she doesn't take herself too seriously. She's funny.
Right.
She does silly things. Says silly things. She goes out and dances. I mean, I'll tell you about my experiences with her. I supported her 2019 race or
Mm-hmm.
2020 race, and I met her in 2019. And the reason why I supported her 2020 race is because when I met her, it was a fundraiser, and there was a photo line and hundreds of people waiting to take a picture with her.
Okay.
And she stopped and talked to me and didn't just like give me the typical politician spiel, right? Like she was asking questions. She wanted to know what bills she should be looking into in order to represent her young constituents. She was asking how she could be bringing young people into her campaign. She wanted to know whether I had looked at her Students for Harris program and whether I had been involved. She spent probably about 10 minutes with me while like her staff was like, pulling her from the arm, and like the people next to me were getting pissed, and like I was at the front of the line, like there were probably a few hundred people waiting there. But
Right.
she had that conversation because she truly cared. And like as someone who has been lucky enough to work with her over the past 4 years, like I can tell you, the same Kamala Harris that was asking me those questions in 2019 is the Kamala Harris that is running for president today. And I genuinely could not be more excited to elect her.
Nice. Stu?
Well, Santiago, for those that may not be aware of your background and your group, can you just talk a little bit about Voters for Tomorrow and what it is you do and how people can support it?
For sure. So Voters of Tomorrow is a youth-led voter engagement organization. Our youngest staffer is 16, our oldest is 27. And we use sort of the insights that we get from being part of our target demographic in order to make sure that we are educating, engaging, and empowering young people in politics and government. So we do everything from the traditional organizing tactics where we'll make calls and we'll send texts and we'll go knock doors to like a lot of very creative stuff. Some of our more creative campaigns, I think, have been we custom printed condoms that had a QR code to register to vote. Am I allowed to curse on this?
Yes,
Oh yeah,
we
Wonderful.
we encourage it.
They had
100%.
a QR code to register to vote on one side, and they said "fuck fascism" on the other. Think about that for a second. And we started giving those out in college campuses. For context, we gave out about 10,000 condoms. We registered about 30,000 people with those. So multiple people per condom. Uh, in in 2022, when they were banning books in high schools, we bought thousands of copies of these books, and we went outside the high schools. We stood up out there, and we were just distributing copies of the books with voter registration information inside. And like that's in person, right? Like the same thing applies online. Our first initiative in 2020 was something that we call prom at the polls. And like I was class of 2020 in high school. I didn't get to go to prom because of the pandemic. But me and few other people decided to capture that energy and turn it into electoral action. And we
Right.
encourage young people to dress up, to ask each other out on proposals, and to go vote together. And we had incredible participation. I think there were like over 1 million pieces of Prominent Polls content created. So a lot of what we do is driven by young people, but it is also largely funded by older people. So if you're watching and you are not Gen Z, but you want to support, please go to votersoftomorrow.org/donate and chip in a few bucks because we really, really do need your help.
So look, I guess got to ask you first. What is the origins? How did the group come to be?
So it's actually a really funny story because I never really intended to do this.
Right.
My original plan was to be an engineer. Uh, I'm originally from Mexico City, and I moved to the U.S. in 2017. And I had always sort of followed international news and international politics. So like when I moved here, it was right in the middle of the Muslim ban, and that was like something that I was paying a lot of attention to.
All right.
And I wanted to really talk about it with my class and like my friends and my peers. And I realized like most people simply either didn't know what was happening or didn't really have the tools to talk about it. I remember one of my friends being like, well, the Supreme Court won't let him do that. And well, it turns out the Supreme Court did let him do that.
Good luck.
So I started tweeting, which is actually where I think I met both of you originally. And for one reason or another, built a following. And in 2019, as we were heading into the presidential election, I really decided to use that following to solve the problem that led me to have it in the first place, which is young people couldn't particularly engage in politics. And at that point, I had seen the numbers. I knew that if young people had voted in 2016 at the same rates that they voted in 2012 or even 2008,
Mhm.
Donald Trump would have never been president. And I knew that we needed to make sure that that didn't happen in 2020. So I started Voters of Tomorrow. We did Prominent Polls in 2020. We continued to organize. We made 8.4 million voter contacts in 2022, and we're aiming to make 20.1 million in 2024.
Wow.
Now, are you working in the swing states, or are you focusing on a more national campaign for young voter contact?
So it really varies because we at the national level really try and play all the federal races, right? So the way that we'll do it is we'll look at the data and we'll essentially find the seats, both at the presidential level, obviously, at the Senate level and at the congressional level, where young people can make the most impact. And most of the time, right, like that's going to be the closest seats, thus the battlegrounds. Sometimes there's like a few shockers out there. Like every once in a while, we'll get like a D+32 seat where like young voters apparently have like massive electoral power. Uh, but that is the list. Like the list of seats that it gives us is the list of seats that we play. And we're working right now, I can tell you, in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, right? We're going to be working in Nevada. We're going to be working in a whole bunch of congressional seats in California, a whole lot of congressional seats in New York. And like we're going to be working in Ohio and Montana because both John Tester and Sherrod Brown have been phenomenal champions for Generation C. And we need to make sure they come back to Washington.
Washington would be a poorer place without a John Tester.
I agree. He's phenomenal.
So, Cynthia, let me, if you were to frame up this race, well, you are framing it up. Can you just tell everybody who's watching sort of how is it that you're positioning this race? Like, what is your framing of it?
It is actually very simple. There's one candidate who is fighting for a future, and there's another candidate who is hearing the clock ticking, who knows that Gen Z is against him and everything that he represents, and who is desperately trying to cling into power before the clock reaches zero. Because he knows that once that does, his people are never going to get in power again because our generation won't allow it.
Right.
So we can either choose a candidate that's fighting for the future, or we can find a candidate that's trying to take us 150 years into the past. We can choose a prosecutor, or we can choose a sexual predator. We can choose the attorney general that went against big banks, or we can choose the guy who ran a big bank. This is not a difficult decision for Gen Z. For years at this point, the Republican Party has been waging war against our generation because they know that they can't beat us because we have time. They're just trying to make it so we can't vote so that they don't have to cede power once they run out of time.
Right.
Yeah,
apologies for mixing my words, you all. I am running on like 14 hours of sleep since Sunday.
Dude,
we've been there.
We are the same. We're in the same spot. It's been a long week, and it's only Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
been a long month. Honestly.
So let me cut to a clip that we're seeing right now out of Atlanta at the Vice President's event tonight. Let's play that clip real fast.
Yeah, good luck beating that.
So let me just say this. The tie-in to popular culture in this race is going to be one thing that Republicans scream and yell and moan and bitch about for the entire time. But I will put up Megan Thee Stallion, Beyonce, Charlie XCX, and eventually Taylor Swift against Lee Greenwood, Kid Rock, and Hulk Hogan any day of the week. I haven't seen anything like this since Obama. In terms
Rick,
of like
are you telling me Kid Rock isn't an election winner?
Call me crazy. I'm sure there are a lot of Kid Rock fans at various state fairs around the country where he performs, but
not to make either of you guys
not quite
feel
like
old,
Taylor Swift or Beyonce.
I genuinely do not know who Kid Rock is, except for the fact he's like MAGA celebrity.
Listen, he was never good when he was a success, even. So, but look, I find that energy, and Stuart and I have both had to be in that position of how do you build that kind of an event? And normally those things take a long time to come together, to put together. It's a lot of work. This campaign's been alive for 8 days, and they're filling an arena like that. I don't think Trump has got a chance to play catch up on that. Trump has a difficult time, getting 5,000 people at an outdoor rally these days. One of the things we just popped up on the screen, folks, and I'd just get your thoughts on this. I mean, these numbers are striking. I mean, Biden was ahead with young voters, but now it's a knockout. And that's the Axios poll. And does that sort of conform with what you're seeing out there in other numbers?
I mean, it conforms for what I'm seeing after a 9-day campaign, because if you think that's what final numbers are going to look at, that's not it.
Oh no,
Donald
I think the
Trump,
number is going to be approaching 3 digits.
Donald Trump again has been waging a war against our generation. If you think he's getting 40% of our votes, oh, you haven't seen anything. We
So let me
have
ask you
a
this question. There was
phenomenal,
a piece out
yeah,
today talking about how young men are becoming more Republican as young women become more Democratic. Um, what are your thoughts on that? And how do you see that? How do you see a fix for that? Because a lot of young men are resentful about where they feel like they are in society these days. There's a lot of tension about that among younger male voters, and I'm curious if you have some thoughts on that, because I've been watching that with some concern over the last couple of years as we've sort of evolved into a country where young men are getting a little bit of Trumpiness about them.
for sure. Yeah, listen, I mean, I think the issue is largely relegated to younger men. And when I say younger, I mean the youngest amongst the young.
Yeah,
I mean the people that were in high school when COVID hit. Because instead of actually going to school and socializing with other people, they fell back in line and really fell down the alt-right pipeline. We
yeah,
saw them go. They fell into Rogan, which led him to whatever Johnson, his name, the guy who that wears Joker suits. That led him to Shapiro. That led them to like all
yeah.
these random people, right? Because the right has invested so much time and
Oh,
money into building this ecosystem.
people have
They
no idea how much time, money, effort has gone into that infrastructure on the far right. Just no idea.
it is it is shocking. And the thing, right, is like all of this kind of leads back to like voting because PragerU is part of this, right? Like you have Heritage be part of this, you have Turning Point and Charlie Kirk be part of this, and they are trying to use this pipeline in order to energize voters.
Oh yeah.
We're lucky in the sense that they're fucking idiots because they don't know how to translate online engagement into actual political action.
Right.
Their voters just stay home. But there is a risk that at some point those people could come out and vote in very big numbers for MAGA candidates. The
Well,
solution is honestly like pretty straightforward. We need to fight this. We need to get in the game and start fighting this war. The sad truth, though, is that for whatever reason, the people on the left don't want to fund that. They largely want to stay out of that space. And I mean, we're trying, right? We're making content. We're fighting the good fight with what we have. But I mean, Turning Point USA outspends us 100-1. So it is very tough to
yeah,
really
you
go
need
toe to
you need
toe
a
with them.
DeVos or a Uline or a Patrick Byrne or one of those types of people that funds those things at scale.
Yeah,
It's tough.
it always struck me as so classic that Charlie Kirk's head of like college Republicans and he never graduated from college. Sort of, it's like Stephen Miller having a legal, super
Right,
PAC.
a legal attack fund.
He has a BA in history from Duke. Like, good luck, Aaron. If you're dumb enough to hire him as your lawyer, you're going to get your ass kicked.
But they have all the money in the world though, and that's the crazy part. For whatever reason, like again, we get lucky because they're really bad at this.
Yeah.
But like they have enough money where if there is even a
Right, they've got
single
enough money
competent
to be able
person
to
in
be
there,
stupid.
yeah,
Yeah, I have a theory about this. There's huge things. I think that people like Charlie Kirk, they they don't care anything about governing, about the outcome. This is all just a vehicle for them to be something that they never were. It's about
That is
them,
true.
to have money. The same way JD Vance is an example of that. A guy who clearly has no sense of who he is. Um, he would be a Trotskyite if it was useful to him at the moment. Whereas I think what really strikes me about your group and people that are drawn to you, and there really is a sense of purpose to it, of having a intent of what you want to do, and not just wanting to be something. And I think that's a real
that makes
marked
sense.
difference. The knowledge of issues is so much deeper. There's a kind of celebration of ignorance in that world, which is the Joe Rogan world.
I mean, and my son, who is 28, a lot of his friends fell in the Rogan hole during COVID 4 years ago.
Right.
And they are like part of that demo that have gone more Trumpy. And they believe that Joe Rogan is a great, deep intellectual leader and thinker. And it blows me away, but it's like insulting their judgment on it is somewhat, I think, counterproductive. But there is nothing in the equivalent space on the left that is kind of transgressive and fun and not. I in a weird way, I think the younger side of the left needs some guys who are kind of dickish. And it's not the Pod Save Bros. It's kind of people who are kind of like transgressive and funny and sarcastic and not just earnest. There's a lot of earnestness on the left for all the reasons, right? I get it.
That's why
you're not marketing to the most earnest demographic.
That's why I like your condom thing, your prom thing is so great, because it's going at it from a different angle.
Right. Well, and that's why we do it. I mean, at the end of the day, right, like the goal is to do, things that are flashy, but the point isn't to do them just because they're flashy. The point is to use the flashiness to accomplish a goal. And in this case,
that sounds like the Lincoln Project. We do some flashy shit, but we also do a bunch of boring things out in the field in the States that no one ever hears about.
But the boring things win elections.
Mechanical, boring, steady, dull, they work. They really do.
I agree. And I mean, I think that's why we're here. Like, at the end of the day, right? Like, again, this was not my intended career path, right? Like, I am doing this because I kind of fell down through the rabbit hole. And I am now fighting, according to the comment that just came on my screen, the Rogan hole. So we're going to keep fighting it. And at the end of the day, right, our goal is to make sure that young people know that they can change the face of American politics. And we're going to continue to do that, whether we're fighting Joe Rogan, whether we're creating our own content, or whether we're continuing to beat Charlie Kirk's face and making it even smaller with 1/100th of the budget.
Well, one other question I had for you about the content creation stuff that you guys do. I know generically young people are centered on TikTok as their news delivery and information delivery platform. Is that where you guys primarily do your work in reaching them?
So most of our work is actually not stuff that we organically post. I think that most of the content that you will see come out directly from Voters of Tomorrow is going to be promotional content. We're going to be talking about recruitment. We're going to be trying to get new people involved in chapters.
Right.
The content that we produce and actually send out is most often going to come out through our influencer channels. And that's very intentional because those influencers have a relationship with their audience that we do not. So we work with influencers, both paid influencers and people who just volunteer their time to create content that will appeal to their audiences, to make sure that we have messaging that is effective and that has been tested. And we do things, we work in a very compressed schedule because we also know that most young people will decide who they vote for after Labor Day. So we have really a very compressed timeline where we're like constantly producing content, constantly talking to people, and making sure that we're pushing people in the right direction. And it's actually very, very funny because we've done a few campaigns in the past that have been very successful, particularly with those young men. So I remember in 2022, for example, we ran a campaign where we went and we got a bunch of influencers that were like very Barstool Sports, dickish type of frat guys.
Right.
And essentially, we worked with them to talk about abortion. And we wanted to make sure that they were talking about the fact that Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans were responsible for banning abortion. And they did. And we saw very good results from the video. Not only did we see a spike in voter registrations linked into these creators' bios, but we also saw that a lot of the people that we were tracking actually did move in towards us. And now we know that like abortion is not only a mobilizing issue for women, but it's also a persuasive issue for men. And especially when you have Project 2025 talking about banning porn, talking about banning contraception, talking about banning Plan B, right? Like these are issues that like, yes, we haven't fully tested our message there, but given what we know from last cycle, it is very likely that those are also going to be persuasive issues towards men, for men.
Well, I can tell you, we in our research for our voter pool, we have a group we call Dobbs Dads. They are millennial and Gen X fathers who they look like Republicans on paper in every other way. But when they hear that their 10 or 12 or 15-year-old daughter, if she gets raped, has to bear the rapist's child, they flip. And I think there's an audience that audience probably ramifies out beyond that Gen X millennial pool and into the Gen Z pool where guys probably feel a lot of the same kind of emotional weight, like, holy shit, I don't want to have, a world where that sort of, a woman that they know or love gets abused and can't get medical care. So, well, Santiago, tell folks where they can reach you on social media.
For sure. You can find, my Twitter got banned, but I have a new one. So you can find me at Santiago Mayer on Twitter. I refuse to say X, that maybe that is why they banned me. And you can find Voters of Tomorrow at Voters Tomorrow in every platform or at votersoftomorrow.org.
Excellent. Well, Santiago, I want to thank you for coming on. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Folks, we're going to play out tonight on the Lincoln Project's new ad. 2 new ads, actually. We're going to play an ad called Dictator, which is something we want people to really listen to because of what Trump said over the weekend about you never have to vote again. And then we're going to roll out with our first big ad, the Harris campaign's first big ad for their candidate. So let's roll out with that. We'll see you guys again on next Tuesday.
Thank you so much for having me.
Follow Resolute Square online. Like, subscribe, follow, do all the things the algorithm likes because we are all slaves to the algorithm. Also, there's new gear in the Resolute Square shop. Check it out. My podcast is The Enemies List. Joe Trippi podcast, That Trippi Show. We also have the Lincoln Project podcast. I do a lot of podcasts. We do a lot of podcasts. And Decoding Fox News. These are just some of the offerings at Resolute. We hope you'll look into it. Hope you'll join, become a member. And we look forward to seeing you guys again next Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
When the dictator speaks.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total.
Listen. When he promises revenge and retribution.
I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
Listen. When he tells you what rights he'll steal from you.
That I was able to terminate Roe v. Wade, and I'm proud to have done it.
Listen. When he promises you this is the last vote you'll ever need to cast.
In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Listen. Because every dictator in history spoke the same way.
He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
Can you hear him now?
The one thing Kamala Harris has always been: fearless. As a prosecutor, she put murderers and abusers behind bars. As California's Attorney General, she went after the big banks and won $20 billion for homeowners. And as Vice President, she took on the big drug companies to cap the cost of insulin for seniors. Because Kamala Harris has always known who she represents.
This campaign is about who we fight for. We believe in a future where every person has the opportunity not just to get by, but to get ahead, where every senior can retire with dignity. But Donald Trump wants to take our country backward, to give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations and end the Affordable Care Act. But we are not going back. I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.